Thanks, guys. I'm going to go through my story about, basically starting here and how I got to where I am today, which is running, we're about a little over $1 million company and growing pretty rapidly. Should do about $3.5 million this year. So I'll try to put some lessons learned in along the way, but feel free to stop me, whenever you want to, and I'll basically answer whatever questions are relevant at that time. I'd rather it be a lot more conversational than me stand up here and present the whole time. So I started here in '04, obviously. Graduated in '08, so luckily didn't have to go a fifth year, but if you do want to go a fifth year, that's fine. I understand that there's really good synergies too today between the business and the engineering school. And for those of you that are in the engineering school today, I would say that one of the pieces of advice is go hang out at the business school a lot. Being here also, obviously, is one of the biggest steps that you can take. I think that it's great that everybody's here. That's by far your interest in entrepreneurship and actually dedicating some of your time when you could be out doing other things to be here and actually learn and dedicate time. I think is also, you have to make some sacrifices. It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun here, maybe too much fun at times, but have fun and still learn, but be here. So throughout the time here, I was also part of the E-Club and involved in the business plan competitions. I understand that you guys have hen hatch. The more times you can go through a business, the better. My very first business experience was with a guy that was back from my hometown who wanted to get into the shirt business. And he was a nurse by trade, decided that he had a great idea for a shirt. So this is like 95% of entrepreneurs are doing something and they have a great idea, and that means they want to get into business. That is like the biggest sign of you're going to fail going out of the gate. First of all, if you can do that, you can have the idea, but don't go into the business right away. My first piece of advice would be go look at other businesses that are doing that. Go work for other businesses that are doing that. Learn the industry, learn the ins and outs, really understand the customers. What this guy did was he thought, it's his idea. It doesn't really matter what you think. If you think it's a good idea, that's great. You're just one data point. I know that Dan and a lot of these guys have been preaching lean startup. You'll hear that from me again and again and again. It doesn't matter as much what you think. It matters what the market thinks. It matters what the market wants. Some people come up with great ideas, sitting on the toilet in the shower all by themselves, and you can start businesses that way. But I think it's much better to start businesses based on what you see in the marketplace. So go out, find opportunities, get into that business. Going back to this first business, this guy liked this shirt idea. He thought that if a shirt had 3/4 length sleeve and like a mock turtleneck, but it had buttons, that everybody was going to buy this shirt just because he thought it's a great design. Just a great design doesn't necessarily sell product, but he thought this was such a great idea that he went out and he bought $15,000 worth of shirts. Now, does anybody think that was a great idea? That's the absolute worst thing you can do to start a business. Don't spend any money, hardly any money when you start a business. Don't invest resources, don't invest a lot of time until you are 100% certain that you have product market fit. And sometimes you run into a chicken and egg problem where you're going to run into this, it's guaranteed. You don't know necessarily if the customer won't be able to tell you if they're going to like it if they can't see the product. So this is something that I struggled with a ton. But what you have to do is you have to build what's called a minimum viable product, or just explain what you could build. So when I got this business started, I'll go to this a little bit. When I got this business started, we were building LED modules. These are light bulbs. You guys have LEDs here. And so these fixture manufacturers, this is actually one of our customers. They build these fixtures. They want to put LEDs in them, these energy efficient light bulbs. So what I did was I didn't have any product. I didn't want to invest any capital in making this product. So I went on eBay and Alibaba and all these other websites, and I went and bought a ton of Chinese product that you could buy for it would cost me thousands of dollars to make, but I could buy for like 50 bucks. And I showed the customers, this is what I could make you. And that way you take a lot of the risk out. So if you're thinking about starting a business early on, don't spend money. That's what I learned from this company called Barney Rag. go out and figure it out. So again, get involved with the business plan, competition, get involved with these startups, or these competitions, this club, and then fast forward to after college. What are you going to do when you leave here? You have a choice. You can either basically join a startup company, you could start your own company, or you could go work for a corporation. My grandfather paid for my college. He said I had to go work for a corporation, so I went and worked for a corporation. I think that that's fine. Even if you have a huge desire to own your own business and you're just like, I'm going to do terrible in the corporate world, I want to go own my own business, I still think it's a good idea to work for a corporation. A corporation will teach you how big companies work. It'll teach you, the management styles. It'll teach you politics, which even in a startup, it's important. I hate politics, but you still have to get involved with it. You still have to understand people, and a corporation might teach you that. So you can do that. You can also go work for a startup. I'd say, or you could go start your own. I'd say either are fine. Ideally, people think of as entrepreneurs as risk takers. The way I think about it is entrepreneurs are actually more risk averse. And what we do differently though is we look at risk and we analyze the crap out of it. And we take very, very calculated risks. So it's not about necessarily just feeling like you have to jump in and go take a risk. After I got a corporate job, even though I knew I wanted to go work for a startup or go have my own startup, what I did was I went and worked for another startup first. And so during that startup, I learned, all the ins and outs of what to do and a lot of what not to do. And then when I went and did my own startup, I was so much higher than when I did my first one in my knowledge level. And it's really hard to see what you don't know and know what you don't know when you're just starting out. So again, the earlier you can start with iterations of, I think I wrote 3 different business plans in college here. Each one you get a little bit better. Each one you get a little bit better. When you go work for a corporation, you get a little bit more understanding of how the world works. When you go work for a startup, that's when you're really baptized by fire. I mean, nothing teaches you like working for a startup. Even if you're just, what I did was volunteered my time because I went and worked for nothing for a few months. Then they paid me $30,000 a year when I could have gotten almost 3 times that as an engineer. But I knew that the $30,000 a year, it was worth a lot more than $30,000 a year. I was learning so much every day about sales, about marketing, about engineering, and about, again, the theme that keeps coming back is lean startup, product market fit. So with this business, all we did was lean startup. Went out to these customers, said, we can build things like this for you. They said, that's great. Why don't you design some for us and we'll build it ourselves. So I did a little bit of that. And that's like consulting work. So when you're getting your startup started, it's not a bad idea to do consulting work because consulting work doesn't require any capital. It creates the customer relationships and it helps you really start to see what products you want to build. So in doing some of that consulting work, these customers told me exactly what products the market wanted. And so within 3 months, we were able to create products that immediately started selling the day that we made them. We didn't create a ton of products, put them up on the shelf, and hope that people were going to buy them. We were 100%, again, going back to risk, I was 100% certain that people were going to buy these products because they told me they were going to buy these products. So that's the position you want to put yourself in, yep.
So you said you went to companies and you told them how to make it themselves?
I told them, they needed this product called an LED module, and they said, well, you're a one-man show, a small company. We don't necessarily want to buy that from you, but we recognize that you have the knowledge in order to build it and know how to make and know how to design it. So why don't you do the design for us? And then we will just build it ourselves so that we don't have that risk of buying from you.
How are you sure that they weren't just gonna be like, well, we know how to make it now, why do we need them anymore? Let's just make it ourselves.
Yeah, that's basically the consulting gig. That's the consulting business model. Is you tell them how to do something, and then they go do that themselves. And it's a service-oriented business. So there's not a long-term. I mean, you can have a lifestyle business out of that, but you can't have a high technology startup, high growth startup out of that. So you do that consulting work with the idea of, and in the back of your mind, that I'm not going to be in the consulting business forever. I'm just doing this to learn about the business, to understand my customers, and so that when I do go make unique product that I'm going to make, and I'm going to own the intellectual property and the patents around it, when I go make that, then it's going to be exactly what the customer wants. So now we're at a point where, even as we're on our probably 40th, 50th product, every single one, the customer is telling us this, or the customers are telling us, this is the product we want. And so let me talk a little bit around IP and around, I think you're heading towards like, you don't want them to steal your idea. A lot of entrepreneurs, they have this, again, they start with an idea, and it's their own idea, and they have this great idea, and they don't want anybody to steal their idea. That's the absolute worst attitude to have. You want to protect your intellectual property, but when you're starting out, you want to spread your knowledge and spread as much information as you can about the area that you're working in. The people that are scared about their idea being stolen are not going to be successful. My second business plan here after the Barney Rag shirt company was a guy that came to the university to have somebody write him a business plan. His idea was to have a wireless water meter that would go in apartment buildings, and it would monitor everybody's usage so that you could charge each person what they were actually using if buildings didn't have meters. And so he was a real estate appraiser by trade, never any industry experience in the, what a coincidence. People flush the toilets, and you would know exactly when, how much flush that was. So he didn't know anything about the business, didn't have any experience in the business, but he thought that, if somebody would write him a business plan, he would be able to follow that business plan maybe and go do it himself. Well, his first mistake was not just going out and figuring it out himself. As an entrepreneur, you can be like a hardcore engineer and just want to sit and, these guys are telling me about coding and their mistakes around sitting in a box and coding all day, but that's not going to get the business off the ground. Either you need to do it yourself, or you need somebody that's going to go out in front of the customers and talk to them and ask them what they want built. And this is again the hardest part of the business. So going back to this water meter, he said, Sean, we need a business plan written. I wrote the business plan and started showing other people in the industry the technology. And immediately he said, oh my gosh, people are going to steal my technology. The intellectual property is in place. He said, oh my gosh, people are going to steal my technology. Bring it all back in. And so you're never able to get a business off the ground if you're not out there sharing everything. So going back to this business, now we are, again, most of you guys are probably at stage one of starting a business, which is finding the product market fit. It's not building out, spending a lot of money, buying a lot of inventory, building out a team. Let me just talk about team a little bit. For myself, I always wanted a co-founder. Everybody, these guys got a co-founder. It's nice to have somebody else in there with you, but be very, 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 very wary of co-founder relationships. Next to maybe your marriage, it's probably the most important relationship that you'll ever have, and it's the highest risk. The people risk and the relationship risk is, I can't tell you how many co-founder divorces I've seen, and they get ugly and they kill a business. Team risk is probably, right up there with product market fit risk as far as number one. So when you're thinking about starting a business, these guys got lucky because even though they're friends, they still complement each other, but just because you're friends with somebody is not a good idea to start a business with them. That's probably the worst idea, because a lot of friends, and same thing with family, they call it playing with fire. You have a much more open communication, you understand each other a lot better, so you can probably be more efficient at times. But the second that one friend starts pulling a little bit more weight than the other, or the second that one friend they don't have the skills necessarily to complement in an area of growth, those relationships get really dicey really, really fast. And for me, I wanted a co-founder. I interviewed, dated a lot of people, didn't find anybody that fit the bill. So I ended up having to roll my sleeves and doing it myself for a while. But now, bringing on more people, the other thing that you can do is don't commit right away to anything with anybody. What I would do is work with them for as long as you can. And again, it's this idea of dating. You don't just get married to somebody. I mean, my brother went to Vegas and just married a girl, but most people don't do that. And so far, so good. You shouldn't do that. Take as long as you can to really date the person. And what we try to do is a 3-month trial period. I found a guy that I thought was going to be our vice president of engineering. On paper, he looks great. He came to the interview. He talked a great game. I had the advisor interview him. He talked a great game. He came in for 3 months. After 3 months, I realized that this guy was kind of an asshole and not somebody that I really wanted to work with. And over time, it comes out when you're working with them. So, you can get better and better at interviewing, but working with there's nothing as telling as working with somebody. So really try to take that dating time. So going back to the first stage is product market fit, building your team. Build your team slowly and very, very carefully, because at the end of the day, it's all about people, it's all about the team, and it's all about this team versus this team. It's like a football game. The best team is going to win. Strategy and these other things play a part, but it's really about the team. The stage that we're at now is scaling the management systems, and putting the financial controls and the operational controls and investing capital in places. And the only reason I tell you that is if you are there, that's what you should be thinking about, becoming a real business. But also, you shouldn't be necessarily thinking about those things right now. A lot of people that start businesses, they get all excited about the website or the logo. Like, I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I met that spend 98% of their time working on their logo, or again, their website, or setting up their office space, or designing their retail space, or designing a product. Good design is important. These things are important, but the number one most important thing is product market fit. I paid some guy $200 on Craigslist to build our first website, and that was good enough for the first year of our business. That got us over $700,000 in revenue with a piece of crap website that I built in PowerPoint that I paid some guy on Craigslist to code for it. So you can get, again, focus on those important things. Any questions so far? Thanks.
When you were looking for your part-time job that you eventually got paid for, were you very upfront about your long-term intentions in regards to, because I know companies, they hire, they want to hire someone like for the long term. So you have to really have to balance using them for their experience and also going your own path.
Yeah. I pretty much told them that I always wanted to own my own business, but I knew that I needed to learn at a business first, and I planned to stay there as long as they needed me to. And if you find the right company, they will want to cultivate you into the person that you want to become. So I would be upfront with them. Don't make it sound like you're just going to bail on them as soon as they're at a point, but they should be eventually. If you're valuable enough and you're showing your value, they will want to craft an agreement that makes you motivated to stay there. And they did that for me, but we just didn't grow fast enough. And so I decided to leave and start another business. And you do also have to be careful if you want to go into a startup in the industry that you want to be in. A lot of startups will make you sign a non-compete. And so luckily for me, I got to stay in the same industry but have a slightly different business model so that I wasn't competing directly with my old employer. So I wouldn't go into work for somebody else that you think you might be a direct competitor for, because you might get into that non-compete issue. But other than that, I would say, go for something very, very similar in the same space, at a different point in the distribution chain. That's another thing that I think a lot of first-time entrepreneurs don't take the time to understand is the way the industry works and the distribution channels that are in the industry. Say that you want to start a new table company. You're not just going to come to the Venture Development Center and say, hey, Venture Development Center, you guys should buy my new table. You got to go to the people that put that table there and the decision makers that put that table there and figure out the distribution channels, and not just try to be blind. And some like Amazon can do it. They can get by with disrupting distribution channels, But as a first-time entrepreneur, it's so much easier to understand how each player in the system works and just be part of that system rather than try to upend it and go direct to the end user. Go ahead.
You mentioned you start out experience based on consulting, customer consultancies. So my question is, when do you think it's mature for you to start up your own business?
When's the right time to start it after consulting? It's really you know, a gut call, and again assessing that risk. You know, do you feel almost 100% confident that as soon as you start this business, you are going to have enough customers to support your immediate costs? You know, we bootstrapped ourselves to over $1 million in revenue just by getting a customer, taking the profits from that customer, investing it in the business, take the profits from the next customer, invest it in the business, and so on and so on and so on. You don't want to get too far ahead. Again, going back to lean, keep it lean. You don't want to get too far ahead from a capital perspective in most businesses. You know, if you're a very experienced entrepreneur, I think that you can raise a ton of money and operate at a loss for a decent amount of time and then scale. But I think that that's really only should be reserved for the second, third, fourth, and fifth time entrepreneurs. As a first time entrepreneur, you know, you should be out there pedaling. You should be out there bootstrapping and learning the business and learning the ins and outs of a startup, because, you know, when I'm still only, you know, maybe like a teenager when it comes to entrepreneurs. But when I was here, I was basically a toddler, and it takes some time to grow up. You know, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world are not the norm. You know, I don't want to say you're not going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, but it's a far shot, I would say. And even he, you know, they make it sound like he was an overnight success. You know, he was coding when he was like 11, and he was starting those iterations. Same thing with Bill Gates. He wrote his first business plan when he was 13. You know, and he wasn't a major success until he was much older. So these guys are not overnight successes, but the earlier you can start, the better. You know, Bill Gates said, "He who fails the fastest wins." So just get out there, try different things. Again, all focused on the market and all doing it very capital efficiently. You know, when these guys were young, they didn't have a lot of capital to burn, so you got to do it very capital efficiently. But in that same vein, also really try to listen to people that have been there, because they say, you know, a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from other people's mistakes. It's not quite the same type of learning because you didn't experience it, but the more you can study people that have done basically exactly what you've done or what you want to do, or go find somebody that's, you know, just a little bit above you. I find that, you know, I have advisors that are 50, 60-year-old businessmen. They help me in a lot of ways, but the best advice that I typically get is from an entrepreneur who is maybe on his second startup, somebody who is just a little bit farther than I am because they just lived through what I'm living through now. So try to find that person that's just a little bit farther than you. They'll have a much more recollection of where you're at right now and be able to give you, I think, more meaningful advice. The other thing I want to mention is focus, and this is probably another one of the biggest failure reasons that I see entrepreneurs don't make it, is because they focus on the wrong things. You know, so and they do the things that they like to do. Unfortunately, when you start a business, you have to do a lot of different things, and you're not going to like all of them. You know, so you really got to say every day, what are the things that I need to do to move the business forward? For me, I do this on a monthly basis. What are the 2 or 3 big things this month that I need to get done in order to take my business to the next level? And it's not always the things that I like to do the most or the things that I'm the best at. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but you know, you get a big cup of coffee or something and you just got to crank it out in order to get to the next step. What other questions?
Kind of random, but how much did you pay for your current website, or how did you get that website?
So again, going back to bootstrapping and networking, we networked with the Ben Franklin Technology Partners. They're a Philadelphia or Pennsylvania-based venture capital arm. They have a program. They created a new program, accelerator program called the EEB Hub Accelerator, and it's a joint venture where they give us reduced office space So we pay $180 a cube, which is a pretty good rate in Philadelphia. And they also paid, they had us use their marketing guys, so we got a $30,000 website. They subsidized some of it, and we only had to pay $3,000. But now we're able to go higher. But again, it's all about figuring out how you can get this much value for this much dollars, and always negotiating and bargaining.
Made your first profits off your first customer. How did you know how best to reinvest that money in your company? How did you decide which areas needed to strengthen, et cetera?
So we didn't make a ton of money off each customer, so it's not like we had a ton of capital to deploy. I just go back to the original process is first find product market fit. And that doesn't mean you need to have a unique kick butt product right out the gate. You just need to have, for us it was these very plain Jane, what we call DC modules. It's LEDs on a board. And so we were making these for customers and just filling a very basic need. We had no competitive barrier to entry. We had no intellectual product. We were just first consulting and then building some boring product. We knew that eventually we needed to invest in intellectual property and creating unique products. So as soon as we had enough funds to do that, I hired some genius MIT dude to basically start engineering some really cool product for us. So we then started to invest it in IP. But by that time, I knew exactly what the customers wanted so that our IP was, exactly what the customers wanted. And then as soon as we start making product around that IP, the customers want to buy it. What else?
How do you acquire new customers, and what kind of channels do you use to sell your LED products?
So we use sales reps. The last business, we would go to direct to end users. Again, about distribution channels. We would go direct to end users and we would try to sell them lights. And when we did that, first of all, that means that somebody from our company that we're paying and has overhead has to go out and do all of that screening and that sales work and close all those sales. And then after they close those sales, you really only have one sale per person, so then they have to go close another one. One of the biggest things that we did in this business in order to scale a lot faster was figured out how to leverage the distribution channels. So when this light fixture the way this light fixture got in here was an architect, or a builder like University of Delaware or an owner would work with an architect who might work with a lighting specifier or a lighting rep, and that lighting rep works for the lighting fixture manufacturer, and that lighting fixture that lighting fixture would be bought through an electrical distributor. And that lighting fixture manufacturer would buy those components. We sell a component into that lighting fixture through a lighting component sales rep. There's actually guys in the US that is all they do is they sell lighting components to lighting fixture manufacturers. And there's only about 10 of them because it's a pretty small world. I mean, so they do a lot of revenue, but there's not a lot for each territory. And so somebody else in the business right away said, I started out cold calling these customers and going to trade shows, and I got a couple that way, but it took me a lot of time, and I knew I wasn't going to scale fast enough. So we found these lighting component sales reps, signed them up, which also is awesome. They're a commission only, so we didn't have to pay them. We didn't have to support the overhead until they made a sale. So we're not putting money out, and we're paying them 30 days after we get paid. So the cash flow is good. And they have the relationships with the customers. That's another great thing about the distribution channels is these reps, these distributors, they're there for a reason. They have the relationships with the customers. So if you can partner with them, and for us, the rep has the trust. As a young company, that's very important. The rep has the trust. We just feed the good product and the technical know-how in, and that's how we really make sales and scale. One of our investors is the owner of a company called Honest Tea. They make iced tea. It's got low sugar in it. It's pretty good, I think, actually. They just got bought by Coca-Cola for $300 million. And the way he went about scale is, his end user is us, typically, consumers. The person that sells, typically, like a 7-Eleven. But he didn't go out and try to sell his tea to consumers. He also didn't go try and sell his tea to 7-Eleven. He went out and he went and sold to distributors, beverage distributors. So there's these beverage distributors that sell Coke, Pepsi, all these products, and he had to get them on board. The only exception to that is when you're getting started, what you typically need to do is, rather than go to the distributor and try to get the distributor to sell your product, you need to work twice as hard, and you need to go to the end user, or the 7-Eleven usually, and you need to get 7-Eleven to agree to buy your product, and then go to the distributor and say, hey, 7-Eleven wants to buy my product, can they buy it from you? And you need to almost make that sale for the next person in your distribution channel.
What's the advantage of then creating a middleman distributor rather than just going, like you said, direct?
That's what I thought at first with my last business. I was like, this lighting distribution channel is so antiquated. It's each person, I don't see how they're adding value. They're just taking a cut off the top. They're just a middleman. But what I learned over 4 years the hard way is that everybody's there for a reason. If they're just being a middleman, in most cases, they would have been cut out by now. You do have disruptive distribution models like Amazon, but in our case, the distributor they're acting like a bank a lot of times. So they're making sure that they get paid and that you get paid a lot faster than you would get paid if you go direct. They're also offering a one-stop shop for, in the beverage case, like a 7-Eleven. You can buy all these different models, all these different brands from this one distributor, so they're adding value that way. They're also adding value in the sense that they have lots of feet on the street, and they're seeing the customers a lot. So there's multiple touch points that they're adding value. So yeah, that's what I'd say about that. I had another point, I forget what it was. What other questions?
You say you have investors.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little about that process of going out and raising money.
Sure. So raising money is a pain in the butt. It's really hard. Investors everywhere, they're pretty conservative. Even angel investors. I think a little bit more probably on the East Coast than on the West Coast. But the number one piece of advice I can give you about investors is get traction. And everybody is familiar with this lean startup now, this lean startup concept. And there's enough startups out there now that actually have proven customers, and or at least pilots, or at least people saying, yes, we want your product, that when an entrepreneur stands up in front of a bunch of investors and they say, I have this great idea and I think all these people are going to buy it, they look like an anomaly, and everybody's just like, well, where's a purchase order? How do we know people are going to buy it? And that's a huge risk in a startup. Like if I was an investor, I don't think I would invest in a startup that hasn't proven, taken the product market fit risk out of it. That there's enough team risk, financial risk, timing risk, competitive risk, all these other risks, that it's easy enough in my mind to at least go do something small. At least a pilot or some sale or sample sale or whatever you can do to actually prove that, yes, my thesis of will this startup work, will people want to buy it, that part's correct.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you guys.